My name is Lillian Monroe. I'm 66 years old, a retired elementary school teacher from Charleston, South Carolina. For most of my life, I believed that love and trust could weather anything. I taught children how to read, how to share, and how to speak kindly. I never imagined I'd be the one standing in a quiet room, realizing kindness could be used as a weapon against me. It started the night before my son's gift. A week-long cruise, he said, would help me relax. "You deserve peace, Mom," Ryan told me, his eyes darting just slightly toward his wife. I smiled, because that's what mothers do. But later, when I went looking for a pen to sign my travel insurance form, I opened the drawer in his study, and everything I thought I knew about my son's love began to crumble. Inside was a neatly stacked folder. I should have closed it. I should have walked away. But curiosity has a way of turning a quiet hand into a trembling one. I pulled it out, the paper cool against my fingers, the scent of ink sharp in the still air. Across the top, life insurance policy, $3,000. My eyes caught on one name typed neatly beside the word beneficiary. It was my son's. A slow breath escaped me. The policy covered accidental death at sea. My mind froze, tracing the words over and over as if repetition could change them. Then, from down the hallway, I heard voices. Ryan's tone was low, uneasy. Samantha's was steady, smooth like glass. "Friday night," she whispered. "Deck 7. No cameras there." I didn't move. I just stood there, the folder pressed against my chest, listening to the echo of their footsteps fade. For a moment, the air in the house felt heavy, charged with a silence I could almost taste. Betrayal doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just breathes quietly behind closed doors. I slid the folder back into place, careful to align every edge. My hands no longer trembled. Something inside me had gone utterly still. I closed the drawer, one soft click sealing away the truth I could never unsee. Then, looking toward the framed photo of my late husband on the wall, I whispered the only words that came to me. "All right, sweetheart, one way for you, too." If you've ever trusted someone more than yourself, if you've ever learned too late that love can be twisted into a trap, stay with me. Because what happened after that drawer changed everything. How I saw my son, my strength, and my own reflection in the mirror. The night outside was calm, the tide gentle against the harbor. I walked out to the porch, wrapped my shawl tight, and stared into the dark horizon. Tomorrow, I would board the Ocean Jubilee. A gift, he called it, a vacation. But the truth was folded in a drawer, and now it lived quietly in my heart. I touched the small silver locket at my neck, the one Harold gave me on our 25th anniversary. Inside was our wedding photo, worn and faded. He used to say, "If you want calm, steer with your conscience." That night, I decided I would. I might be 66, but I was not helpless. I would let them play their game, smile when they smiled, and bide my time. As the porch light flickered, I whispered to the night, "If they want to test the ocean, they'll find it's deeper than they think." Then I turned back inside, packed my travel bag, and folded a plain envelope with my name on it. Tomorrow, I would smile, thank them for the ticket, and step onto the ship they chose for me. But the tide was already turning, and I was ready to meet it head-on. Morning light slipped through the kitchen blinds, cutting soft lines across the table where 2 cruise tickets waited beside a steaming pot of coffee. Ryan stood by the counter, his smile a little too bright, his voice a touch too rehearsed. "Mom, this trip is for you. Just 7 days. No cooking, no cleaning, no stress. You've done enough." I looked at the tickets, crisp and gleaming, like invitations to a dream that no longer fit. "Ocean Jubilee," I read aloud, letting the name linger between us. Samantha appeared behind him, her perfume delicate, her tone honeyed. "It's just to relax," she said. "You deserve some time away." Her fingers brushed his shoulder, and their eyes met for a second longer than they should have. I caught that glance, that small spark of silent agreement. I smiled, slow and steady. "That's kind of you both." My voice carried the same warmth I'd used when my students handed me drawings of stick figures and crooked hearts. Acts of innocence, even when I knew the truth behind the ink. Ryan pulled a small envelope from his jacket. "Spending money," he said quickly. "Everything's covered. Just enjoy yourself." I took it, feeling the weight of cash and the heavier weight of what he wasn't saying. We sat for breakfast, though none of us ate much. Samantha scrolled through her phone, tapping messages too fast to be casual. Ryan stirred his coffee long after the sugar dissolved. I folded my napkin, carefully, the way Harold used to when he was hiding something behind his patients. They tried small talk, weather, neighbors, the ship's entertainment, but every sentence felt like lace stretched over stone. At one point, Ryan reached across the table, took my hand, and said, "You'll feel better after this, Mom." His grip trembled. Mine didn't. Later, in my room, I placed the envelope beside my suitcase and began to pack. I folded light dresses, a sun hat, and my favorite white scarf, the one Harold gave me after our last trip to Savannah. Every item felt like armor now, chosen not for beauty but for readiness. I slipped a small notebook into the side pocket. Its pages would hold the details no one else saw. By the window, a gull perched on the railing, pecking at the morning air. I whispered to it, half a prayer, half a promise. "Let's see if calm seas can still hide storms." As I zipped the bag, my mind circled back to the folder in that drawer, the $3,000 line, the cold ink naming my son as beneficiary. I thought of Harold's voice in memory. "Truth isn't kind, but it's steady." He was right. I wouldn't run. I wouldn't accuse. I would go, eyes open, heart steady, and gather proof one tide at a time. When the sun climbed higher, Ryan knocked softly at the door. "We'll drive you to the port tomorrow morning," he said. "We'll see you off properly." Samantha smiled from behind him. "Don't worry about a thing." I lifted my suitcase, nodding. "I won't." But worry was no longer the word for what I felt. Beneath the calm, something sharper had taken root. Resolve. That night, I brewed chamomile tea, sat by Harold's framed photo, and spoke quietly. "I'm not going on their vacation. I'm walking into their plan." I touched the edge of the picture frame, tracing his smile. "But you always taught me, when someone writes you off, rewrite the ending." Outside, the harbor lights shimmered on dark water. Tomorrow, I would board their ship. And while they watched for weakness, I'd be watching everything else. By morning, the house felt quieter than usual, like it was holding its breath. I double-checked my luggage, the envelope, and the cruise ticket, then stepped outside. Ryan loaded my suitcase into the trunk, his movements quick, efficient. Samantha stood by the car, arms folded, a smile too polished to reach her eyes. The drive to the port took less than an hour. Ryan talked about the ship's size, the shows, the food. I answered softly, letting his words drift past me like waves against a hull. My thoughts stayed anchored in the drawer, on that neat stack of paper, on the word beneficiary. At the terminal, crowds bustled under bright banners. Ryan hugged me, and for a moment, his heartbeat thudded against mine, hurried and uneven. Samantha leaned in, her perfume sharp in the heat. "Don't worry about a thing, Lillian. Just enjoy yourself." Her voice was sugar, her eyes steel. I smiled, lifted my bag, and walked through the glass doors into the terminal. They waved once, turned back toward the parking lot, and vanished into the sea of taxis. For a heartbeat, I almost believed it was over. Then, halfway through security, I reached into my purse and froze. My medication case was gone. The pills, small, white, for my blood pressure, were still on the counter, my name printed across the label like a quiet lifeline. I hesitated. A small voice whispered, "Don't go back." But another answered louder, "If you fear the dark, you'll never find the switch." I turned around, thanked the attendant, and walked back into the warm Charleston sun. The car was gone, but home wasn't far. The neighborhood stood silent, familiar. I unlocked the front door, stepped inside, and the hush felt heavier than before. On the kitchen counter, the pill box waited beside a half-empty glass of water. I reached for it, then froze. Voices, faint but clear, coming from the study. Ryan's voice carried first, low and strained. "Once she's on board, it's out of our hands. The ocean will take care of the rest." Samantha's reply was crisp, almost gentle. 3 million settles everything. We can finally start over. My hand gripped the doorframe, cold creeping up my spine. Their words hung in the air like smoke, impossible to catch, but heavy with truth. My son's voice, my daughter-in-law's calm precision. I stepped back into the hallway, heart steady, mind sharp. They were in the room where I'd opened the drawer. I could see the edge of the desk, the sunlight glinting off the brass handle. My son stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear. Samantha leaned over the desk, closing a laptop. They didn't see me, and I didn't need them to. I turned quietly, pillbox in hand, and walked back to the door. Each step measured, silent. Betrayal can shatter you or sharpen you. That day, it did both. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of salt water and magnolia. I slipped the pills into my purse and looked toward the harbor. My path was clear now. I would board their ship, play their game, and write every detail down. Ryan once told me I was too trusting. Maybe I was. But he forgot who taught him to plan lessons, to test theories, to mark every wrong answer. I'd been a teacher too long to ignore what was being written in front of me. I locked the door behind me, one slow turn of the key, and whispered, "You'll learn, my son. You'll learn that tides bring back what they try to bury." The cab arrived at the curb, its engine humming softly. As I climbed inside, I held my purse close, eyes on the road ahead. I would not flinch. The ocean was waiting. Back home, the afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the porch, turning the white railing into thin lines of light and warning. I set my suitcase by the door and walked straight to the living room, to the framed photograph that had anchored this house for 30 years. Harold's gentle smile looked back at me from behind the glass, the same one that had steadied me through storms, bills, and grief. I lit a small candle beneath his portrait, the flame trembling at first, then standing firm. "Did I raise a monster?" I whispered, "or a man who lost his way?" The question fell into the quiet like a stone dropped into deep water. I didn't want an answer. I only needed resolve. Ryan's voice from that morning echoed in my head, every word now reshaped by truth. "You'll feel better after this, Mom." Maybe he thought money would ease the ache of guilt. Maybe Samantha convinced him it was mercy, not murder. Whatever story they told themselves, it ended here. I sat at the old oak desk Harold built, opened a fresh envelope, and wrote in clean, careful script across the front, "If I don't return." Inside, I placed a copy of the policy I had photographed on my phone, the timestamp proof of its discovery. Then, a handwritten note addressed to Grace Whitaker, retired attorney, friend, and the only person I trusted enough to hold my secrets. "Grace," I wrote, If this reaches you, I didn't come back. The evidence is inside. Policy, beneficiary, conversation notes. Contact the authorities immediately. Don't let grief cloud judgment. I chose calm, not surrender. I tucked in a spare house key, my temporary will, and a small flash drive containing scanned documents, tickets, receipts, even a screenshot of Ryan's text confirming my departure time. I sealed the envelope with wax from the candle, pressing Harold's old navy ring into the warm red pool until it hardened. The imprint of an anchor gleamed faintly under the light. Rising slowly, I walked to the front window. Across the street, my neighbor Mrs. Langley tended her roses, pruning carefully, humming off-key. She had known Harold, known the boy Ryan used to be, the one who built sandcastles and left notes on my pillow. I stepped outside, the envelope in my hand, and called softly, "Margaret." She turned, smiled. "Leaving tomorrow, Lillian?" "Yes," I said. "Would you do me a favor? If I'm not back in 10 days, could you drop this by Grace Whitaker's office on King Street?" Her brow furrowed. "Everything all right?" "Everything's just as it should be," I answered. And it was. Sometimes preparation is the purest form of faith. She nodded, tucked the envelope gently into her gardening apron, and promised to keep it safe. I thanked her, then looked up at the sky, a soft wash of gold fading toward dusk. Back inside, I extinguished the candle, leaving a thin thread of smoke curling into the air. The scent of wax and salt lingered, mingling with old wood and memory. I rested my hand against the photograph one last time. "You always said justice moves slow, Harold," I murmured, "but it never stops." In the hallway, I paused at the mirror. The woman staring back looked older than yesterday, but stronger too. Fear had no hold now. It had burned off in the heat of truth. I tied my hair into a neat bun, slipped on my wedding ring, and whispered a quiet vow to my reflection. I'll walk through their storm and come out clean. The night deepened. I folded my shawl over the suitcase, turned off the lights, and locked the door behind me. Tomorrow, I'd board the ship carrying both my danger and my deliverance. And if the tide tried to claim me, it would have to reckon with a woman who'd already chosen her way home. The morning air along the Charleston Pier carried the scent of salt and diesel, mingled with the chatter of travelers chasing escape. I arrived early, suitcase in hand, the return ticket I'd purchased folded neatly inside my purse. The sky blushed with a thin band of coral, the kind Harold loved most. "A fair tide," he used to say. Today, it felt like a warning wrapped in beauty. Ocean Jubilee loomed ahead, gleaming white against the horizon, a floating city promising luxury and leisure. To most passengers, it was paradise. To me, it was a chessboard. Every deck, every corridor, another move waiting to be made. A cheerful attendant checked my passport and ticket, her smile open, unknowing. "Welcome aboard, Mrs. Monroe. Cabin 847, portside. Balcony view." She handed me a key card embossed with the ship's emblem, a gold compass. I nodded, thanked her, and stepped into the air-conditioned hall where soft music hummed above the roll of luggage wheels. Cabin 847 sat midway down a quiet corridor, the door locking with a smooth click. Inside, polished wood gleamed under recessed lights, a single bed dressed in crisp white linens, and a sliding glass door leading to a private balcony. I pulled the curtains back. Beyond the railing, the Atlantic stretched endless and gray-blue, calm for now. I unpacked deliberately, placing my notebook on the desk, my phone charger beside the lamp, and the envelope of cash Ryan had given me in the drawer. Every action was a thread of control, weaving order from chaos. Before the safety drill began, I sat at the desk and dialed Grace. The call connected after 2 rings. "You're on board?" "Yes," I said quietly. Cabin 847, port side. I confirmed the cameras near my door. 2 angles, both visible. I'll map the blind spots after muster. Grace's voice was steady, grounding. Document everything, no direct confrontation. Collect proof, keep calm. I know. I glanced toward the balcony, sunlight spilling across the railing. If they come for me, they'll meet the tide prepared. She paused. You've always been braver than you realize. Not brave, I replied. Just done being naive. We ended the call. I opened my notebook and sketched a simple map of Deck 8, noting exit routes, stairwells, and the observation points marked on the ship's pamphlet. The hum of engines deepened, a low vibration rising through the floor as the Ocean Jubilee began to move. When the horn sounded, passengers gathered along the rails, waving to the shrinking skyline. I stayed near the bow, watching Charleston fade into watercolor distance. Somewhere beyond those clouds, Harold's memory lingered, steady and sure. A voice interrupted my thoughts. First cruise? A young crew member smiled, clipboard in hand. First in a long time, I answered. I used to teach, not much time for travel. He nodded politely, moved on. I turned back toward the sea, noting the nearest camera nestled above the lifeboats. Its lens tilted slightly left, leaving a narrow stretch of railing uncovered. I traced the angle with my eyes, memorizing it. Later, back in my cabin, I stood at the balcony door. The breeze lifted my scarf, brushing cool fingers across my neck. Somewhere on this ship, plans had been laid for my disappearance, but they hadn't accounted for preparation, or a mother's quiet vigilance. As evening settled, the lights of the ship glittered across the water. I wrote 3 sentences in my notebook. Departed Charleston. 6:02 p.m. Deck cameras operational. Then, closing it gently, I whispered, Lesson 1. Always know where the eyes aren't. I slipped the notebook into the bedside drawer, turned off the lamp, and lay back, listening to the steady rhythm of the sea against the hull. Tomorrow, the real voyage would begin. Not toward rest, but revelation. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the balcony doors, turning the room soft gold. I dressed simply. A linen blouse, navy slacks, the white scarf Harold once said made me look like I carried peace wherever I went. On a ship like this, blending in was its own kind of armor. The breakfast deck buzzed with chatter, the smell of brewed coffee and buttered pastries drifting over tables dressed in linen. I chose a seat near the window, the ocean a slow-moving painting beside me. A waiter poured tea, and I thanked him, stirring quietly as I watched couples laugh, families point toward dolphins skimming the horizon. Then, a voice. Warm, clear, touched with humor. Is this seat taken? I looked up to see a woman in a red sundress, hair streaked silver, eyes sharp and kind all at once. She carried a small leather bag and the posture of someone who'd seen too much to be fooled easily. Please, I said, gesturing to the chair. She sat, setting her napkin on her lap with practiced grace. Evelyn Hart, she introduced herself. I worked as a ship nurse for 25 years before I retired. Thought I'd take one last trip without being the one handing out seasickness pills. I smiled, faintly. Lillian Monroe. First time at sea in a long while. Her gaze softened, studying me. You've got that look, you know. The one passengers wear when they're not here just to relax. I stirred my tea, careful not to meet her eyes too long. Old habits. I plan even when I don't have to. Evelyn chuckled, low and knowing. Planning's never wasted out here. Ships are floating worlds, crowded, chaotic, full of blind corners. Her words pricked my attention. Blind corners? Every deck's got them. Cameras can't catch everything. I could show you if you'd like. Most people never notice until it matters. She took a slow sip of coffee. Funny thing, though. You notice the small things. That's rare. I considered her offer, the calm certainty behind her voice. Some people talk to fill silence. Others talk to steady it. Evelyn belonged to the second kind. After breakfast, we walked the promenade together, the sea bright and endless beside us. She pointed to a corridor near the lifeboats. See that stretch between the storage door and stairwell? No coverage. The camera's lens stops just short. I nodded, memorizing it. Why tell me? Because you remind me of someone, she said gently. A woman who once stood right where you are, pretending she wasn't afraid. I stopped, leaning against the railing. And was she? Evelyn's eyes met mine, steady. Not for long. We shared a quiet moment, the kind built on unspoken truths. I didn't tell her about the policy, or the whispers in the study, or the one-way ticket I'd already replaced. But something in her gaze said she sensed the weight I carried. By noon, we parted ways, promising to meet again for dinner. As I watched her walk down the deck, the red fabric of her dress fluttering like a small flag in the wind, I realized I no longer felt entirely alone. Back in my cabin, I noted her name in my book. Evelyn Hart, former ship nurse, understands layout, sees people clearly. Underneath, I wrote, not all strangers are dangers. Some are lighthouses. Outside, gulls traced circles over the waves. I stood at the railing, let the salt air fill my lungs, and whispered, Lesson 2. Even on an open sea, you'll find allies. Night settled softly over the ocean jubilee, the horizon melting into shades of indigo and silver. Most passengers gathered in the lounges, drawn to music and laughter, but I preferred the quiet decks where the ship hummed against the current. I walked slowly, the air cool, the scent of salt and polished brass drifting around me. Above, stars shimmered faintly through thin clouds, fragile but persistent. When I reached the open promenade, the sea stretched infinite and dark, a mirror for everything I was trying to hide. The railing stood before me, sturdy, waist-high, harmless to most. To me, it was more than metal. It was the line between fear and resolve. I had seen too many news reports, too many tragic headlines, too many stories of accidents at sea. Now I knew how easily one could be arranged. The thought tightened my breath. My son's voice echoed again, low and trembling. The ocean will take care of the rest. I stepped closer, resting my hand on the cool surface. The steel bit gently against my palm. The ship swayed, not enough to throw me off balance, but enough to remind me how small I was against the tide. For a moment, the world tilted. The moon, the stars, the waves, each pulling in its own direction. I closed my eyes and inhaled slowly. If fear meant to drown me, I whispered, it should have tried earlier. Harold's words from years ago drifted back through memory. Stand firm, Lillian. The sea respects those who don't flinch. My heartbeat slowed. The trembling in my fingers eased. I opened my eyes and looked down into the dark water, moving in slow, rhythmic folds. It no longer looked like an ending. It looked like proof of how far I'd come. A deckhand passed nearby, nodding politely before continuing his rounds. His lantern cast a faint glow across the railing, a reminder that I was seen, not lost. I straightened my shoulders and leaned forward, just enough to feel the wind rise against my face. Cold, clean, alive. For a long while, I stood there, letting the ocean's rhythm steady my own. Waves lapped against the hull like a heartbeat older than mine, patient and sure. Somewhere inside, the weight I'd carried since opening that drawer began to shift, not gone, but lighter, as if shared by something vast enough to hold it. I thought of Ryan as a boy, standing on this same kind of deck years ago, holding Harold's hand, pointing at dolphins with wide-eyed wonder. I remembered Samantha's careful smile, the one she wore when she wanted something. I remembered the folder, the ink, the quiet cruelty of planning another's fate. And still, I breathed. I was here, alive. A teacher, a mother, a widow, a woman who refused to vanish. Leaning back, I placed both hands on the railing and pressed down, grounding myself. "You won't break me," I said softly, to the waves, to fear, to the ghosts of betrayal whispering through the wind. The ship's horn sounded in the distance, low and steady, marking the passage of another hour. Lights shimmered across the water, scattering like pieces of glass. I watched them flicker, then turned toward the corridor, calm now, no longer shaken by what could be. In my cabin, I wrote in my notebook, Lesson 3, face the edge before they push you to it. Then I slipped it beneath my pillow, turned off the lamp, and lay in the dark listening to the ocean cradle the hull. Tomorrow would bring movement, questions, and signs I couldn't ignore. But tonight, I had stood at the edge and remained whole. And that, I knew, was its own quiet victory. Morning light broke through thin clouds, painting the sea in streaks of silver. The ocean jubilee glided calmly, each ripple catching the sun like a secret it couldn't quite hide. I dressed early, fastening my locket and tying my white scarf once more. Today, I needed answers, not from words, but from paper and ink. After breakfast, I met Evelyn in the main atrium, her red shawl draped neatly over her shoulders. She smiled, eyes sharp with quiet understanding. "You've been thinking," she said. "I've been confirming," I replied. "Would you walk with me to the service desk?" Together, we descended one level, weaving through polished hallways and smiling attendants, offering maps and coupons. The front desk gleamed under soft lights, a curved counter of white marble, screens glowing gently behind it. A young clerk greeted us with a practiced smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Monroe. How may I help you?" I set my passport and ticket on the counter. "I'd like to verify something about my booking." He scanned the barcode, fingers moving briskly across the keyboard. "Certainly. Cabin 847, portside, 7-day voyage, Charleston to Miami." His brow furrowed slightly. "Your record shows a one-way itinerary." "One-way?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "That must be a mistake. My son handled the reservation." He turned the screen slightly, revealing the details. Departure, Charleston. Arrival, Miami. Return, none. Evelyn shifted beside me, silent but alert. I let my gaze rest on the monitor, the faint reflection of my face hovering over the text. "Thank you for checking," I said calmly. "Could you please issue a return ticket? I'll pay now." "Of course, ma'am." He typed quickly, then handed me a small payment terminal. I slid my card, signed my name, and accepted the new itinerary along with the printed receipt. The timestamp blinked clearly in the corner, 08:42 a.m. I slipped the documents into my folder, then asked, "Could you email me a copy, just to be safe?" "Already sent?" he replied, smiling again. "You'll see it from Ocean Jubilee Guest Services." "Perfect." I nodded, thanked him, and stepped aside. Evelyn followed as we moved toward a quiet seating area near the observation windows. She crossed her arms, leaning against the glass. "One-way tickets, hidden clauses. Someone's been thorough." "Not thorough enough," I said, holding up the receipt. "Every detail leaves a trail." "You plan to keep all this?" "Every scrap," I answered. "Truth has a pattern. You just have to collect enough threads to see it." She studied me for a moment, then smiled. "Remind me never to underestimate a school teacher." We sat together, watching the ocean curl in soft folds below. Passengers laughed in the distance. unaware of the quiet war unfolding 2 decks above their heads. I opened my notebook and wrote carefully. One-way ticket confirmed. Return purchased, timestamp logged, witness present. Then I tucked the receipt inside, sealing it like a small promise. When Evelyn left for her midday walk, I returned to my cabin. Sunlight filled the room, bright and clean, as if daring me to believe the surface. I placed the receipt inside a clear sleeve, snapped a photo with my phone, and emailed it to Grace. In the subject line, I typed 3 words: chain of proof. Minutes later, her reply appeared. Got it. Keep building the trail. I exhaled slowly, the weight of control settling around me like armor. They had written my departure as an ending. I was rewriting it as evidence. Outside, the ocean shimmered against the horizon, endless and waiting. I stepped onto the balcony, gripping the railing not with fear this time, but with quiet resolve. Lesson 4, I murmured. When they plan your disappearance, document your return. By the second afternoon, the ocean jubilee had settled into its rhythm of laughter, music, and endless waves. But beneath the polished routines, I felt the current shifting. The further we sailed from shore, the clearer every detail became. I had my ticket, my notes, my proof. Now I needed faces to match the whispers I'd overheard. Evelyn found me near the pool deck, where sunlight scattered across the water like coins thrown for luck. You've been watching, she said softly. Just listening, I answered. Every crowd has someone who doesn't belong. She nodded toward a cluster of passengers by the bar. One of them? My eyes followed hers. Most wore bright shirts, straw hats, smiles as wide as the ocean. But one man stood apart, his jacket a deep green, his gaze sharp and unsettled. He wasn't here for leisure. He was here on assignment. He glanced around, scanning exits, cameras, and crowd patterns with professional detachment. When his eyes brushed past me, I lowered mine, pretending to check the cruise brochure. Evelyn's voice barely rose above the wind. Don't stare. Let him think you're harmless. I've spent a lifetime being underestimated, I whispered back. It's my greatest skill. We waited. When the crowd thinned, I stood and walked toward the slot machines just inside the lounge doors. I took a seat, pressed a button without care for the outcome, and let my shoulders relax into a tourist's posture. Moments later, the man in green entered, scanning the room before choosing a seat 1 row behind me. I dropped a few coins into the tray, pretended to fumble, and turned slightly. These machines ever pay out? He smiled politely, voice low. If you're lucky. His eyes flicked to the wristband on my arm. Cabin 847, right? Port side? My heart thudded once, then steadied. That's right, I said, feigning casual surprise. You're observant. He shrugged. Just good memory. I laughed softly, leaning closer. I'm not great with directions. I get turned around near the railings. The words landed like bait on calm water. His expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes clicked, a quiet recognition. Moments later, he stood, muttered something about checking the upper deck, and walked briskly away, phone already in hand. Evelyn, watching from across the room, followed him out discreetly. I stayed a few minutes longer, letting the coins clink softly, then rose and slipped into the corridor. When Evelyn returned, her face was pale but focused. He made a call, said, "She's scared of the railing. Perfect." Then he mentioned Friday night, deck 7. I caught the time, 4:17. I wrote it down as we walked, the hallway empty except for the hum of the engines beneath our feet. So they hired him, I said quietly. They gave him a story to match the insurance clause. Evelyn nodded. He's not some drunk or gambler. He moves like crew, but he's not. I'll ask a friend in security to cross-check the manifests. Back in my cabin, I locked the door and spread my notebook on the desk. The pages filled quickly. Man in green jacket. Knows cabin number. Repeated deck 7. Confirmed fear of railing. I slid the pen aside, lifted the curtain, and stepped out to the balcony. The sea stretched endless and glittering, each wave a quiet witness. Lesson 5, I whispered. When danger greets you politely, let it think you're still afraid. Somewhere below, the engines thrummed steady, like a heartbeat counting down to something unseen. I turned back inside, placed the notebook beneath my pillow, and straightened the folded scarf on the chair. Every detail mattered. Every hour brought me closer to the truth. The following morning, the sky hung low and pale, the ocean smooth as glass. I rose early, the events of yesterday replaying in fragments, the green jacket, the quiet phone call, the phrase that mirrored the policy clause, word for word. It was time to bring the truth into the open, but carefully, step by step. Evelyn met me near the main staircase, her expression calm but purposeful. "Security shift just changed," she said. "The captain's in his office reviewing logs. If you're ready, now's the time." "I'm ready," I said. My voice held steady, though my heart beat quick and measured, like a drum guiding soldiers toward battle. We walked through narrow halls lined with framed photographs of lighthouses and smiling crews. At the end stood a door marked Captain's Quarters. A uniformed officer opened it, nodding us inside. Captain James Harrison looked up from his desk, silver hair trimmed neatly beneath his cap, eyes the color of stormlight. "Mrs. Monroe," he greeted with a quiet authority. "I was told you requested a private meeting." "Yes, Captain," I began, laying a sealed folder on the desk. "This contains documents and notes regarding a potential insurance fraud connected to my booking. I believe there's an active plan to stage an accident at sea." He opened the folder, scanning the contents with practiced focus. Photocopy of the policy, time-stamped photo of the one-way ticket, the email confirmation from the desk, and yesterday's note describing the man in green. "I see," he murmured. "If what you claim proves true, we're dealing with attempted homicide under maritime jurisdiction." He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "This ship sails under Bahamian flag law. Our first duty is to preserve evidence. Once we dock in Miami, the case transfers to U.S. federal authority. That means everything must be documented, sealed, and handed over in a verified chain of custody." "I understand," I said. "I used to teach. Lessons mean nothing if the work isn't shown." His lips curved faintly, the shadow of respect in his eyes. "We'll begin by securing surveillance. My team will place additional coverage near your cabin and deck 7. I'll also assign a plainclothes guard for observation." Evelyn added, "There's a man, mid-40s, green jacket. He's not listed on the crew manifest." The captain nodded, scribbling notes. "We'll start with staff interviews." He pressed a button on his intercom. "Send Steward Miller to my office." Minutes later, a young steward entered, holding a master key card and a clipboard. His hands trembled slightly under the captain's gaze. "Mr. Miller," the captain said evenly, "were you near cabin 847 last night?" The steward blinked. "Yes, sir. Routine towel service. I checked the inventory. Everything accounted for." Evelyn and I exchanged a glance. The captain stood, motioning toward the security log on his monitor. After a moment's search, the timestamps confirmed it. Miller had been on duty in another section during the reported call. His nervousness came not from guilt, but from the weight of suspicion. "You're dismissed," the captain said gently. When the door closed, he turned back to me. "False leads are common at sea, but your evidence is solid, Mrs. Monroe. We'll focus on the verified trail." Relief touched my chest, quiet and fleeting. Thank you, Captain. He nodded once. Until we reach port, avoid Deck 7 at night. My officers will monitor the blind spots. Any unusual activity, you notify me directly. He slid a small card across the table, his direct line. Keep this with you at all times. I took it, folding it carefully into my pocket. I will. As we left his office, Evelyn whispered, "That went well." "Better than luck," I said softly. "It went lawful." Back in my cabin, I added a new entry in my notebook. Captain informed. Jurisdiction secured. False suspect cleared. Protective watch established. Then, underlined once. Lesson 6. Justice begins with procedure, not panic. Outside, clouds gathered over the horizon, a soft gray curtain promising change. The ocean, steady and patient, carried us onward. By the 5th night, the ocean jubilee glowed like a chandelier set adrift. Strings of light shimmered across the decks, violins played near the ballroom, and passengers floated through the corridors in silk and satin. It was gala night, the crown jewel of the voyage, and beneath the laughter and champagne, the clock ticked toward a plan I could almost hear breathing in the dark. I stood before the mirror in my cabin, fastening the pearl earrings Harold had given me on our 10th anniversary. They caught the light with each small movement, steady as my resolve. I smoothed the folds of my navy dress and looped the white scarf around my shoulders. Tonight, appearances would be everything. A soft knock came at the door. Evelyn peeked in, radiant in her red gown, eyes sharp beneath her warmth. "You're sure about this?" she asked. "I'm sure," I said. "If they think I'm predictable, they'll make their move. I want every piece of evidence waiting for them." She nodded, slipping a tiny recorder into her clutch. "Security's ready. Captain's team is watching the corridor. I'll stay close." We entered the ballroom together. The chandeliers glittered, the air filled with perfume and music. Waiters in white gloves wove between tables, balancing trays of wine, glasses that caught reflections of gold and rose. Ryan stood across the room in a tailored suit, Samantha at his side, her laughter ringing too bright. When our eyes met, his smile flickered, just for a heartbeat, before settling into polite calm. He approached with 2 glasses of champagne. "Mom," he said, voice soft, "to new beginnings." I accepted the glass, noting the faint swirl where bubbles rose unevenly. "To family," I replied. Our eyes held for a moment, his trembling beneath charm, mine unblinking. Then Evelyn touched my arm, smiling sweetly. "Let me hold that for you while you dance, dear." She took the glass, placed it on a nearby tray, and swapped it with one from another table. The waiter whisked the tray away, disappearing into the crowd. Ryan hesitated, something uneasy flickering behind his eyes. "You look beautiful tonight," he said quietly. "So do you," I answered. "Harold would be proud." The words landed heavy, weighted with memory he couldn't return. After an hour of mingled conversation, I feigned a yawn. "I think I'll turn in early," I told Samantha, who offered a smile too quick to be kind. "Get some rest," she said. "You've had a long day." I walked slowly back toward my cabin. The corridor hushed, lights dimmed to a soft amber. Somewhere behind me, a pair of footsteps followed, steady and careful. I slipped my keycard into the door, opened it just enough to step inside, and left it unlocked as planned. In the shadows of the hallway, security waited, eyes on the corner. The captain's voice murmured through their earpieces, "Hold position until entry." Midnight came and went. At 12:15, the door eased open with a muted click. A figure slipped through, dressed in dark clothing, a gloved hand holding a small card key. Darius Cole. His gaze swept the room, landing on the balcony. He crossed the floor silently, inspecting the latch on the railing. From the hallway, 2 officers moved into place. "Now," one whispered. The lights flicked on. "Step away," the captain ordered, voice firm. Darius froze, muscles tensing, then dropped the card and raised his hands. In the room's quiet hum, the officers collected his phone, a set of lockpicks, and a damp pair of gloves. Evelyn entered behind them, holding the champagne glass in a sealed bag. "Traces confirmed," she said. He was meant to follow her. The captain nodded. "We'll detain him in the holding cabin until port. Everything goes to the authorities in Miami." I exhaled, steady but not relieved. The trap had closed, but the storm had only begun to clear. After they led Darius away, I turned to the balcony door, the sea glimmering beyond the glass. The night air pressed cool against the window, calm and deep. "Lesson 7, I whispered. "Set your own stage, and truth will take its bow." By dawn, the Ocean Jubilee had turned from celebration to silence. Word of the midnight arrest traveled in whispers through the breakfast lines, passengers glancing nervously down corridors as if danger might drift past in a tuxedo. I remained in my cabin, curtains open to a pale horizon, waiting for the captain's call. It came just after 7. "Mrs. Monroe," Captain Harrison said, his tone composed. "We've begun evidence processing. Would you come to the security office?" "Of course," I replied. My hands were steady now, my purpose clear. Evelyn met me in the corridor, holding a small folder. "They're pulling data from the man's phone," she explained as we walked. "Grace confirmed receipt of your files. She's cross-referencing bank accounts and corporate names." "Good," I said. "Let's see where the threads lead." The security office sat deep within the ship, humming softly with electronics. On the central table lay sealed evidence bags, the champagne glass, the phone, a key card, the gloves. A technician looked up from his laptop. "We've retrieved partial data," he said. "Messages, call logs, a few deleted files." He used a prepaid device, routed through a dummy business account. "Which business?" the captain asked. The technician angled the screen toward us. A company name glowed against a dark background, Harbor Legal LLC. The air in the room shifted. Evelyn drew a slow breath. I felt it, cold and sharp, settle in my chest. Samantha's creation. I remembered her words at breakfast, her casual mention of helping families manage claims. She'd even boasted once about understanding maritime law. The technician clicked open a restored message. "Payment confirmed. Execute before docking. Policy reference 227M. Beneficiary Ryan Monroe." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the reality sink in. My son's name again, inked into betrayal he didn't fully understand. "He thought he was saving his life," I murmured. "She was trading his soul." Evelyn touched my arm gently. "You warned Grace in time. The receipts, the copy of the policy, they'll hold in court." Captain Harrison studied the screen. "This clause," he said, pointing to a scanned document labeled "Accidental Death at Sea, Double Indemnity Provision." It pays double if the incident occurs beyond territorial waters. We crossed that line last night. "So she planned the timing," I said quietly. "Friday night, deck 7, no cameras." He nodded. "She used his signature, his trust, and your absence. A perfect trap until you opened the drawer." I leaned over the table, eyes tracing the details. "Beneficiary, Ryan Monroe. Clause, double indemnity. Executor, Harbor Legal LLC. Samantha's fingerprints, her precision, her cold logic. But now the evidence chain was unbroken, sealed, and time-stamped. "Captain," I said, "I want these delivered directly to the authorities at port. No detours." "They'll go straight to the FBI Maritime Division. In Miami," he assured me. "Agent Nora Hale will take custody." Then it's almost over, I whispered. Evelyn shook her head softly. Not over. Nearly resolved. Back in my cabin, I sat by the balcony, notebook open. The sea stretched endless, indifferent, but the light on the water had changed, clearer, almost forgiving. I wrote carefully, Harbor Legal LLC linked. Clause, double indemnity, Ryan unaware. Samantha architect, evidence chain intact. Then beneath it, a single line. Lesson 8. Truth hides in fine print, but justice reads every word. My phone buzzed. A message from Grace. Harbor Legal registered under Samantha Monroe, principal. Bank trail confirmed. FBI briefed. Be ready at dock. I set the phone aside, folded my hands, and looked toward the horizon. Somewhere ahead, the shoreline waited, and with it, the reckoning. By sunrise the next morning, the skyline of Miami glimmered ahead, faint and gray against the lifting mist. The Ocean Jubilee slowed its steady heartbeat, engines easing as the harbor grew near. Crew members moved briskly along the decks, securing ropes and preparing disembarkation. I stood at my balcony, the salt air pressing cool against my face, and whispered, "Almost home." A knock sounded. Evelyn stepped in, holding a small packet sealed in plastic. "Final chain," she said. Inside were labeled bags, the glass, the gloves, the phone. "Captain wants you present when we hand everything over." I nodded. Grace texted this morning. She's ready on the legal end. Together, we walked through the narrowing corridors. Passengers gathered luggage and waved to dock workers below, unaware that justice was assembling just a few steps away. The captain greeted us near the main gangway, flanked by 2 uniformed security officers. "We'll meet the agent at customs," he said. "Federal jurisdiction begins the moment we touch the pier." The ship's horn sounded once, low and final. Dock lines flew, tightened, and locked. A ramp extended with a heavy clang. As my shoes touched solid ground, a strange calm washed over me, like stepping back into gravity after days suspended between trust and betrayal. Agent Nora Hale waited beside a black SUV, badge clipped neatly to her blazer, eyes focused and steady. "Captain Harrison," she said, shaking his hand. "Thank you for the alert." He gestured toward me. "Mrs. Lillian Monroe. She initiated the report, collected preliminary evidence, and provided documentation." Her gaze met mine, firm but kind. "Ma'am, we'll need a sworn affidavit. Can you confirm all records and timestamps are yours?" "I can," I said, "and I've kept copies off-site." I handed her my folder, each page ordered, labeled, and signed. She flipped through the documents with practiced speed. The policy photo, the receipt, the manifest excerpt, the printout from Harbor Legal LLC, the notes from the ship's technician. "Everything aligns," she said. "Chain of custody intact." She nodded toward the officers. "Log and seal all evidence under case number 24197. Evelyn stepped back, watching as the items were cataloged and placed in a reinforced container. The captain signed the log, then me, then Nora. 3 names, 1 trail, unbroken. When the paperwork was done, Nora lowered her voice. "We've located Ryan and Samantha Monroe at Miami International Airport. Tickets purchased 2 hours ago. Destination Nassau. We have a team en route." I inhaled slowly. "He doesn't know the full story," I said. "She led him here." "Then this may be his chance to tell the truth," Nora replied. "You'll be contacted once they're in custody." We stood for a moment beside the pier, the sound of gulls circling overhead. Around us, passengers laughed, luggage rolled, taxis honked. The ordinary world continued, unaware of how close one life had come to vanishing beneath its surface. As Evelyn and I walked away from the SUV, she glanced at me. "How do you feel?" "Tired," I said softly, "but not afraid." She smiled, slipping her arm through mine. That's the right kind of ending. Back at the terminal, I signed the final affidavit, my name steady across the page. Lillian Monroe, affiant. Beneath it, the date, the time, and the words, witnessed by Agent Nora Hale. When the pen left the paper, a small exhale escaped me. The lesson Harold had tried to teach me echoed through memory. Justice doesn't shout. It signs its name. Outside, sunlight spilled across the pavement, warm and clear. I tilted my face toward it, feeling the heat gather along my cheeks. The ocean behind me whispered against the hull, a closing chapter in a language older than betrayal. Ahead waited the reckoning, the courtroom, and a son who would have to choose truth over pride. The hotel room was quiet, washed in late afternoon light that softened every sharp edge. I sat by the window overlooking the bay, the city unfolding beneath me in slow motion. Traffic humming, gulls circling, the faint glimmer of water beyond the bridges. The phone lay on the table beside the evidence copy, its screen blank, waiting. Agent Nora Hale had called earlier, her voice steady but gentle. "They're in custody," she said, "both detained at Miami International. You'll be contacted for testimony once we process the charges." Now the silence around me felt heavy, filled with all the things a mother should never have to feel. Disbelief, grief, pride, and sorrow braided together. My son's name had appeared on a contract for my death, but I still remembered the boy who built birdhouses with Harold, the teenager who walked me to the market when my knees hurt. Somewhere in that man, love still lived, buried under fear, debt, and manipulation. I lifted the phone, pressed call, and waited. The line clicked, a muffled shuffle, then his voice. Hoarse, small, almost unrecognizable. "Mom? Ryan." The word came out soft but sure. "I know everything." A long silence followed, broken only by his uneven breathing. "She said it was just insurance," he whispered. "A backup. I thought—" His voice cracked. "I didn't know she meant to hurt you." "You signed the papers," I said quietly. "Your name was on the line." "I thought I was saving us," he said. "She told me it was a trust. She said you'd be fine, that we'd pay off the debts." I closed my eyes, the ache in my chest both familiar and new. Debt can be repaid, Ryan. But trust, once it breaks, it doesn't rebuild the same. On the other end, a choked sound. "I remember you used to say honesty was the only thing we owned that couldn't be stolen." "You remembered," I whispered. "I forgot how to live it." We both fell quiet, the kind of silence that doesn't seek to punish, but to reflect. Outside, a ship's horn sounded across the harbor, long and low, like a sigh. "Agent Hale told me you cooperated," I said. "That helps." "I'm not doing it to help myself," he answered. "I'm doing it because you still answered my call." Tears welled, but I let them fall freely this time. "I'm your mother," I said. "That means I'll always answer. But love doesn't erase consequence. You'll serve your time. You'll face the truth. And when you do, remember this moment. The tide turns for everyone, Ryan. It's up to you where you stand when it does." He inhaled shakily. "Mom, I'm sorry." "I know," I said. "Be better than your mistake. Let that be how you pay me back." A soft knock at the door pulled my eyes toward the hallway. Evelyn stepped in, carrying 2 cups of tea. She set one beside me, nodded toward the phone, and said nothing. "I'll see you again," I told him, "when the lesson's learned." The line stayed open a second longer, then ended quietly. I held the phone against my chest, breathing through the ache, letting the stillness settle into something gentler, grief softened by grace. Evelyn handed me the cup. "Was it worth the call?" "Yes," I said, looking toward the sunset gilding the water. Some storms only pass when you forgive the rain. She placed a hand on my shoulder, her warmth steady. You taught him the truth. That's all any mother can do. As dusk fell, city lights flickered on one by one, reflections dancing across the glass. I lifted my cup, sipped slowly, and whispered, Lesson 9. Forgiveness isn't surrender. It's the proof you survived. 2 months later, I stood in the back row of the Miami courtroom, hands clasped around a worn handkerchief Harold once carried on deployment. The ceiling fans stirred the warm air in steady circles, and sunlight streamed through tall windows, catching dust motes that floated like quiet witnesses. At the front, Ryan sat beside his attorney, shoulders slightly bowed but face uncovered, eyes clear for the first time in years. Samantha, in a dark suit, kept her gaze fixed forward, expression carved from stone. The murmur of voices faded as the judge entered, robes sweeping the floor, gavel striking once, sharp and final. This court recognizes the plea agreements in the matter of State v. Monroe, he began. The evidence, including communications, financial trails, and witness testimony, confirms conspiracy to defraud and attempted harm under maritime jurisdiction. Each word landed with weight but not vengeance. Justice, when real, is a scale, not a sword. The judge continued, reading from the file. Samantha Monroe, primary architect of Harbor Legal LLC and executor of falsified contracts, is hereby sentenced to 25 years in federal custody. A whisper moved through the gallery. Samantha did not flinch. She simply adjusted her cuffs, the motion small, defiant, meaningless now. The judge shifted his gaze. Ryan Monroe, accomplice by signature, cooperating witness by confession, the court acknowledges substantial assistance in the investigation. Ryan rose slowly, voice unsteady but sincere. Your Honor, I was blind. I wanted to fix what I broke, not break more. I accept responsibility. The judge nodded once. 8 years in state custody, with eligibility for early release based on continued cooperation and good conduct. A hush settled again. I drew a breath and let it out, quiet and steady. This was not triumph. It was closure written in ink and consequence. When the session ended, Ryan turned, searching the rows until his eyes found mine. For a moment, the courtroom fell away. The walls, the murmurs, the lawyers shuffling papers. All I saw was my son, older now, but finally honest. I pressed my hand over my heart, a gesture that said everything words could not. He nodded, a tear catching the corner of his eye before he bowed his head and let the bailiff guide him away. Samantha followed, silent, her heels clicking across the polished floor like punctuation at the end of a chapter. Outside, the Florida air was warm, filled with the scent of rain and hibiscus. Evelyn waited on the steps, holding an envelope. From Ryan, she said softly. He asked me to give you this after sentencing. I opened it there beneath the courthouse archway. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, his handwriting familiar, careful. Mom, prison walls teach clearer than wealth. I don't blame anyone else now. You gave me life twice. Once when I was born, and once when you showed me what truth costs. I'll earn my way back, even if it takes the rest of my days. Keep teaching, even if your students aren't in a classroom. Ryan. I folded the letter, pressing it to my chest as the wind lifted the edges of my scarf. He's learning, I whispered. Evelyn slipped her arm through mine. He will. Some lessons only take root in hard soil. We walked toward the parking lot where the sky opened wide, clouds drifting apart to reveal a clean blue. I tucked the letter beside my notebook, where every note of the journey waited. Tickets, receipts, copies, lessons. Proof that justice can travel a long road and still arrive on time. I glanced up at the courthouse once more before we left, sunlight gleaming against its columns. Lesson 10, I murmured. Justice isn't revenge. It's redemption written in plain sight. 6 months later, Charleston greeted me with the smell of salt and magnolia. The tide rolled gently along the harbor wall, brushing against the mossy stones that had watched over generations of sailors, teachers, and mothers who learned the art of waiting. I stood on my porch, the afternoon sun resting warm across my shoulders, and gazed at the framed ticket hanging above my mantel. It was the return stub from the Ocean Jubilee, creased, stamped, and carefully mounted behind glass. The words "round trip" shimmered faintly in the light. For months I had carried that paper like armor. Now it was a keepsake, proof that I had come back not only alive, but whole. Grace arrived first, walking up the path with her usual confident stride, leather briefcase tucked beneath her arm. "The center's all set," she said with a smile. "You ready to teach again?" "Always," I replied, handing her a stack of flyers. Across the top, bold letters read, "Legal literacy for women over 50. Know your rights before you need them." We turned the old library on King Street into a place of gathering, a room filled with folding chairs, thermoses of tea, and women who had lived long enough to be underestimated. They came with questions about contracts, wills, bank accounts, and trust clauses. I showed them where to sign, where not to, and what words could save a lifetime of work. "Lesson 1, I told them, writing across the board, "never mistake politeness for protection." The women nodded, some smiling, some blinking back quiet understanding. Later that evening, Evelyn joined us, carrying a tin of oatmeal cookies and her old nurse's badge. She hugged me tightly. "You kept your promise," she said. "So did you," I answered. "You came back." After the workshop, we walked down to the pier where the sky opened wide over the water. The sun had dipped low, painting the horizon with streaks of gold and lavender. I carried a small shell in my palm, smooth and pale, etched with tiny lines that looked like ripples frozen in time. Evelyn leaned against the railing. "Do you miss the sea?" "I think it never left me," I said, turning the shell over in my hand. It taught me patience and proof. Every wave returns, even the quiet ones. I stepped closer to the edge, the scent of brine rising with the breeze, and released the shell into the tide. It disappeared beneath the surface, carried outward on a shimmer of foam. Behind us, church. Bells chimed the hour. Grace checked her watch, smiled, and gestured toward the road. "Dinner's on me tonight. I owe you a toast." "Make it tea," I said softly. "My celebration's already waiting." They laughed, and together we walked back toward the lights of the city. I looked over my shoulder once more, watching the water glimmer beneath the fading sun, each ripple a reminder of the path I'd taken. At home, I poured myself a cup of jasmine tea, sat by the window, and opened my notebook one final time. The pages were full now, dates, names, lessons, and lines of reflection. At the very end, I wrote the closing thought I'd been saving for months. Justice can be silent. Dignity always returns. I set the pen down, lifted the cup to my lips, and smiled. The sea breeze drifted through the open window, cool and steady, carrying with it the scent of home and the promise of peace. Lesson 11. The strongest voyages end where they began, with truth, with grace, and with women who come back wiser than before.